Thanks for checking out this Game of Thrones review video. All right, let's jump into episode 3 of season 8 of Game of Thrones. This is the one that after seeing episode 2, everyone was geared up for, ready to go. This is kind of what it seemed as like the culmination of the entire series, because this is where it was heading. For so long, people had said winter's coming, winter's coming. It eventually came a few seasons ago to a degree, but now it was the big showdown with the Night King that everyone had been waiting for, where humanity was coming together, minus Cersei and her folks. No big surprise. And so, yeah. Real quick, if someone's starting to watch this and they think, oh, maybe there aren't spoilers, it is all spoilers in this review, so turn around if you haven't seen the episode. Anyway, I literally just watched it, took all my notes, so I'm fresh. I'm fresh off it. So let's dig in. So immediately, what I really did like about it is all the silence in the beginning of it. I know there are a lot of people who are just like, oh, I don't like it when a show or a movie's has like long stints of silence. But for me personally, I think in film it can be extremely powerful, especially in this day and age where a lot of the movies and the shows that we watch are very heavy on music, and it's okay. Getting a little too ahead of myself. It's heavy on music, and the problem is that it ends up telegraphing to you, this is how you're supposed to feel, instead of allowing you to focus on what's actually going on, minus the music, and figuring out yourself how you want to feel about the scene and what's going on, and just being able to feel the actual gravity of what's going on in front of you and the acting that's happening as well. The problem is, for me, I mean, don't get me wrong, music can really, really enhance scenes, but it's so nice every now and then when it's totally out and it's just like, it's silence, so you can feel something else. And it's kind of like, especially in this episode of Game of Thrones, this sound of serenity with the silence, with the backdrop of chaos and like terribleness and war that's just about to start. So I thought that choice of being so silent was a very good one. And it's kind of like this other thing where like people don't necessarily need to be talking before war either, because a lot of people are kind of contemplating their lives, potentially their deaths. And, you know, as we know from the prior episode, everyone was thinking, we're going to die. So I thought that was really good. In addition, another thing that was happening with that silence, that like one take camera scene, or that camera shot where they were like following one character and then they go to another character and then another character while they're all getting ready for war, was awesome. It looked really good. It was really nice. And it was just cool to kind of like get little glimpses of how people are getting ready and just being like, oh yeah, there's this person. Oh yeah, there's this person. And it really sets you up to kind of start thinking immediately in the episode, who's going to get it? You know, like who is dead this episode? Because I know a lot of people going into it, myself included, were like, we could lose a ton. Like a lot of characters in this. I mean, I don't think anyone's like, oh, we're going to lose everyone. Potentially everyone's dead. I don't think anyone really thought that, especially because there's 3 more episodes. But I was thinking heavy casualties coming up, and not just a bunch of red shirts, no-name people. I'm talking about, you know, the big names, the named characters. And that did happen. Probably the least impact on me death-wise in this episode was, I always forget his name. Gren had already died, the one Night Watchman. Is it Pip who's the guy who's still alive? I can't remember. But that dude, when he got it early on, that probably had the least impact. Well, other than Melisande, you know, because who really likes her? Nobody. I mean, she's like a crappy person. But she served her purpose, you know. The Lord of Light told her what to do. She did it, and then she evaporated as she walked away. Yeah, I kind of saw that's where it was going as soon as she started walking out at the end. But I'll go in kind of like sequential order here, so. Okay. One of the things that really struck me in this, when the war starts, the fact that they're just like, all right, you Dothraki, go to your deaths. It was just basically like, you guys don't speak the language around here. You're very aggressive people. You have horses. Why don't you all just go die? and then the rest of us will wait in a more fortified situation for the bad guys to come to us. It was like, oh man, they're really doing this to the Dothraki? That's pretty disrespectful. That's terrible. So that struck me. But the cool thing was when Melisandre came and she lit all their swords on fire, which it looked real. I mean, the lighting of them, I'm sure, was CGI, but the actual, like, the parts where it's showing them close up with the swords on fire, and when they're riding, all those scenes of, like, the horses going by with them on fire, that looked real. And I don't think that was CGI, but maybe it was. Maybe the CGI was that good that I was like, that's real, but it's CGI. I don't know. But that was cool. It was great leading up to the fight starting. Seeing when they went to Samwell Tarly and you see his face and he just looks like he's ready. Like, for the first time in his life, like, he's ready. He looked, like, mean. He looked focused. He looked confident. And that's the first time in this show series that he's really looked like kind of a badass, to be honest. Like, this is the turn where he's just like, I'm accepting this. I'm stepping up. I'm being who, you know, I'm supposed to be at the end of this gigantic journey. Like, he's the man of the house now. Like, he's the head of Tarly, the House of Tarly now, basically, because his brother and his father are gone. So, you know, I talked about that on the other ones, that, like, that switch happens. You know, it's pretty much immediate, where he's like, oh, you know, now I'm different because this is my place in House Tarly. So, yeah, I just thought that was really cool. Although, you know, when the actual fight's happening, it's a very different situation. He's not as confident. So, yeah. I will say one big negative to me with this is that it was so dark and snowing during a lot of the actual fighting that it makes it hard to tell what's going on. Like, I watched it in the morning when I'm recording this. I didn't watch it last night. I'm sure people are like, oh my God, you didn't watch it when it was immediately on? I was doing some podcasting stuff last night, so I was busy with that. But, yeah, first thing this morning. And so I had to, like, close all my blinds to make sure it was, like, super dark in the house so I could see better. But even then, like, it's hard to tell what's going on because it's so dark. Like, they needed a little bit better lighting. But that also may have been intentional to kind of give you the feel of the confusion of war, or the fact that if they do that from a technical standpoint, they don't have to make the any CGI they're putting in there look as good, or the makeup that they're putting on, like, White Walkers, they don't need to make that look as good. Because if you think about it, how much time do they really have to put super amounts of detail into tons of people who are playing White Walkers? So maybe from that angle, that's why they were doing it. I don't know. But it just kind of, like, bothers me because it's hard to tell what's going on sometimes. And the other thing is, with HD shot things that are in high definition, when you have really dark things going on and things are moving relatively fast, it leaves, like, tracers on shapes. So, like, if a person's, like, running in the dark, you see, like, a tracer following this person. So the whole time I'm watching, I'm just seeing, like, all these tracers in the dark. And it's like, distracting, it's confusing. But then again, you know, maybe that's just whatever TV I'm using. Maybe other people watch it and they're like, oh, I didn't have that at all. So, you know, you can let me know down in the comments if that's the situation. Maybe I need to upgrade my TV. It's not super new, but it should be supporting HD properly. And when things are well lit, no problem. I will say that. There was the first little big moment in this for Arya was when she kind of saved the Hound, Sandor Clegane, when he was, like, running and there was a White Walker coming after him, and she just, like, whoop, with an arrow right in his dome. I think it was, like, right in his eye or something. And he's like, oh man, she saved me. So I felt like that was kind of the turning moment of, like, she's accepting that he's a better person now. You know, like, I will save this guy. He seems like he's different. He's turned a new leaf. So that was kind of my feeling on it. So that was her first, like, big-ish moment. Because this, obviously, if you watch this episode, it was a huge episode for Arya. I wouldn't say it's all about Arya, but in the end, it was kind of all about Arya. So, I literally, when I was watching this, was like, couldn't Melisandre just go light that fire trench? And then, not long after I wrote that, she walked out, and I was like, oh, okay, perfect. That makes sense. Perfect. Good writing on that one. I'm glad they took it that way. But when things started going wrong, I was just sitting there thinking to myself, and of course things go wrong because it's Game of Thrones. Things can't be neat. You can't just have things go the right way, which is, why we love the show so much. I'm sure everyone watching this feels the same way. You love it because it's unpredictable. You love it because the good guy doesn't always win, which keeps you guessing, keeps the tension up. And this did a good job of keeping tension up in the episode. So when the fire trench stopped all those White Walkers, I was like, this is the moment right here for the two dragons to swoop in, Daenerys and Jon Snow, well, Aegon Targaryen, to swoop in and just start lighting them up, because they're standing in place, and there were none of their people hanging out there. So like that was the safest, best time for them to just come in and start doing it. I understand that they were working at getting at the Night King because that's the main objective, because once they would take him out, all the other White Walkers would just collapse, die, shatter, however it goes. But I just saw that and I was just like, oh man, this is the time. This is the perfect opportunity to just take a bunch of them out. But they would just keep coming, as we saw later in the episode where, the Night King shows up and he's just like, whoop, and rises everything up. The old White Walkers and the new dead who become White Walkers. And it's like, well, this looks real bad, as it usually does in Game of Thrones. Always looks bad. So the other thing that struck me is when the fight's going on, I'm like, man, White Walkers are so creative. Because when they started just like piling their bodies into the fire so that others could just walk over them through the trench, and then coming up the walls and everything and just not stopping, and I'm like, man, they're so creative. And then I was like, wait a minute, it's not actually creativity, it's just brainless determination. Like, they have no concern for their own well-being because they're not really people anymore. They don't really think. They just go at it at the direction of Night King. So I was just like, oh, it's just mindless determination is what it really is. So, sorry, allergies. So another thing that occurred to me with all the craziness going on in this, and for the first, I don't even know, like half hour maybe, it was kind of just like go, 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 like crazy stuff. And then it slowed down a bit. But I was like, how in the world do you direct this? How do you keep directing these massive, massive scenes with so many people and so many things going on? I can't imagine. I have done some directing at like a super, super small independent film level, and it is maddening enough to do that. Like, just directing a few people, I can't imagine. I was just thinking, like, how do you do this? It's nuts. And then I wrote down, oh, here's the moment that Arya finally starts doing stuff that everyone was waiting for with her. She's had all this training. She's had a long story. She's been through so much. And she came out of the House of Black and White like being a super badass. But you didn't see it on display to the degree that you saw it in this episode, when she finally just kicks in and she just starts whooping the White Walkers, just going nuts, which ends up inspiring Sandor Clegane, the Hound, who starts being just like, this is pointless, we're all dead, we're fighting death, he literally says, which he's right. And she inspires him by what he sees her doing, because Beric Dondarrion's like, tell her that, and she's just like, fighting. So that was really awesome. But then it also created a lot of disappointment to me when they then transitioned kind of quickly, kind of out of nowhere, to her sneaking around inside the castle and trying to avoid a bunch of White Walkers, which it didn't look like there were that many White Walkers actually in there at that time when she was in there. And so I was like, why is she like avoiding them now? My only thought was she's tired, so she kind of needs to get up her energy maybe. But other than that, like, she was just like taking care of tons of them in a much more cluttered environment. She can take care of picking off a few of these real quick, but I guess I'll have to chalk it up to just being tired. But that, pacing wise, it kind of like, I don't know, it kind of like made you hit a wall, because the pacing was like so fast and it just kept moving, and then it was just all of a sudden like, boop, we're going really slow all of a sudden, and you're like, whoa, okay. And it just kind of like killed the pace. It's like, stop. It's like, go, stop, so suddenly. And I was just like, what? So that was kind of a weird choice, in my opinion. But I think it may have also been to kind of give them a break in the filming and in the directing, to be like, all right, let's get some stuff in here that's more calmed down, a little bit easier to shoot, a little more calm, So I guess I kind of understand it. Um, I don't. Is the girl's name Ileana? The girl who had the armor on and she ended up stabbing the White Walker giant in the eye and killing him, which was badass. Good on her. She's always been like a little spitfire, and so to see her get that moment, she just it was a triumph for her, even though she ended up dying, which was sad. But she was always just like, I'm doing this and I'm doing that, and people were trying to tell her like, I think you should be down in the crypt. She's like, I'm gonna fight with everyone else, and she did, She had her moment. She went out on top, and so that was good for her. Is her name Ileana? Tell me in the comments. I can't remember. She's from House Umber, or is it Karstark? I think it's Umber. I want to say it's Umber, but I might be wrong. Tell me. Let me know. But anyway, like, that was a cool moment, and how she took down a giant. Like, she's so small, and she's so feisty, and she took down this giant White Walker. But that was a cool moment. I really enjoyed it. And as she was, like, having the life squeezed out of her, she's just like, eh. It was nice. I enjoyed that. Yeah, it was just Arya sneaking around, wasn't so great. And then, okay, so then they had the part where Arya's sneaking around, and then they had the part where the Hound and Beric Dondarrion are then doing the same thing, kind of like just sneaking around the halls inside of the castle, which seemed kind of weird to me because stuff was still in full force going on the outside of the castle where they would be of way more use. So it kind of seemed weird to me that they would go inside the castle at that point and just be like, let's sneak around and see if there's a stray White Walker here or there. It's like, no, you're needed outside, you guys. Get out there. So it didn't really jive with the story and who those two are as characters, in my opinion. So I was kind of like, would this be happening right now? I don't know. And then there's the issue of when Beric Dondarrion ends up getting taken down and he ends up dying. He was getting stabbed a lot, and at one point he falls way behind in the hallway, and he's just getting nailed. He's getting nailed, and I'm just like, oh, he's just going to go down right there. But somehow, like magically, he catches up to the Hound and Arya, and they get into that other room where Melisandre is, and he dies in front of them then. I understand doing that from the standpoint of, like, it's more impactful if you give people the time to, like, see him dying alongside characters who kind of like cared for him. So I understand that, but at the same time, it didn't make sense because he wasn't close enough to make it, especially with the amount of times he'd been stabbed. Like, he was really not going to make it with the shape that he was in. So that just was, I was like, okay. But, with a lot of this stuff, you kind of got to let that slide because overall, Game of Thrones is extremely well done. Like, extremely well done. So when I bring these things up, it's just like nitpicky type things. So, the other thing is the death of Beric Dondarrion. I was kind of like, oh, Beric, but it didn't hit me super hard because, like I said, in a previous episode I did of this, or a previous video I did about other episodes, at this point in the story, in the books, Beric Dondarrion has long been dead. So I've just been, as I've been watching the show, I'm like, every time he pops up on the screen, I'm like, is this where he gets it? Is this where he gets it? Because I know he's dying. I know he doesn't have a super significance to the story because he died a long time ago in the books. Yeah, so then I wrote down dragon fights are pretty sweet. Yeah, I think with what they did with the CG in this, with the dragon fights, looked really good. And once again, this is where I'm kind of going back to what I was talking about with it being snowy and dark. It may have been a situation where they're like, man, we gotta have a dragon fight, like these two totally CGI dragons fighting each other. It would be a lot easier if it was dark and snowy, so we didn't have to put as much detail into these dragons as they're fighting, because I can imagine that being a big pain. But when you're seeing the dragons and you're seeing all the CGI that they do in the show, they've done an amazing job. It's always looked top-notch. So, yeah, maybe they're just giving their CGI teams a little reprieve there. One of, I think, potentially my favorite scene in this was the one where Jon Snow is like running through the inner wall of the castle as like it's just chaos all over, and he's like seeing all the big name characters as they're struggling in their fights with White Walkers, and the first of which he sees is Samwell, and you get this moment where you're just like, oh, it's Sam, he's gonna go help him out. And he doesn't. He sees him and he keeps going. And then he sees like Brienne, he sees Jaime, he sees Gendry, he sees all these characters. and he just keeps going. And it's kind of this moment where I was like, um, I think people aren't gonna like this from the standpoint of that's not Jon Snow. He would stop and help, but it's more realistic, I think, because he has a mission. He needs to get things done, and he's looking for the Night King, who he just kind of lost to. But yeah, like I love that scene because he does what you're not expecting to do, and just the way it was shot and the way it looked, it was, and the way it played out, it was outstanding. I think that was my favorite scene. Plus, it seemed like a long scene, which was nice. Theon got a good death. I'm going into like my talk at the end about the deaths. I couldn't have thought of a better outcome for Theon Greyjoy, basically, in this. He got a good death because Bran basically said, well, he did say, you're a good man, thank you. And that's kind of all he needed. Like, that's the end of his story there. Like, he went through so much. He caused a lot of problems in the beginning, and he really wronged the Stark family, Bran included. And for Bran to, in the end, basically forgive him and give him that gift and say, you're released, is when he's then like, yes, I can go die, and I can die a death that while it's happening, I feel good about who I am at this point in time. So I felt like that was the best outcome for Theon. So it was nice to see that. I mean, when he was kind of surrounded and it was just him and Bran, you were really like, yep, this is the end for him. But it was a good death. It was. Jorah Mormont going down. When I was seeing him die, I was like, he's been on borrowed time, kind of, because of the whole grayscale thing. Like, at that point, a lot of people, I mean, I assumed, I was like, I think he might just end up dying from this grayscale. But Sam had saved him. But he's kind of been on borrowed time, it seems like. There's a big impact there, obviously, for Daenerys, because she obviously loved him. And I don't know if people didn't really think about this. You probably did. A lot of people are smart when it comes to Game of Thrones fans. He was her true love. He really was. But because of what she was doing in life, his position, her position, she felt like she had to keep him at an arm's length at least for the greater good. Like, she couldn't allow herself to partake in that love between the two of them. So when she finally sees him die in front of her, it's this realization to her of, all along, this has been my true love. And to some degree, I guarantee she held on to the hope that she would be with him in the end when everything was said and done. And the realization right there of that's not going to happen. And maybe also the realization of, maybe I should have let the love that was there take it to the natural level, because there's regret now because he's gone. So I thought they did a good job of trying to make that impactful. For me, it wasn't as impactful on a personal level because I was like, I feel like he's been on borrowed time. But, the cool thing with when Jon Snow was like facing up to the dragon is like, it's that moment you just saw in him. He was just like ready to face death again. That would have been his second death, but he was just like, he was ready to accept it. He was just like, this is it. Like, if this is what it is, this is what it is. But part of me also thought that he was trying to test the theory of like, the Night King got nailed with a mouthful of fire from a dragon and nothing happened. Maybe I'm that special too. Let's test that out. So a small part of me thought that, but yeah. So obviously he gets saved in the huge Arya moment, which was cool. I thought that maybe, like, when she jumped out of nowhere and she went to stab the Night King, I thought, oh, cool, like, this is her big moment, that's awesome. And then he catches her by the neck and he starts, like, choking her. And I was like, oh, well, okay, maybe they're just going to kill her here, because you never know, because of Game of Thrones. And then that moment where she, like, drops the knife down to her free hand and just jabs it in. It was a slick move. It was a slick camera angle. It looked good, and it was nice. And then he's just like, blows up. In a satisfying nature. Doesn't show any emotion, though, sadly. I wanted him to show a little something, just like, Would have been nice. And then the last thing I have written down about deaths, Melisandre. You kind of knew it was coming when she showed up in the beginning, and I think she said to Davos, oh, you want to kill me, but something to the effect of, you want to kill me, but, don't bother, because I'll be gone in the end. So in the end, when she comes walking out and she just like turns to dust, I was like, bye, Felicia. Peace. I don't. Good. See ya. I'm glad you showed up and did a few good things for a minute. Goodbye. So I think a lot of people probably felt that way too. But they gave her a cool death. It was nice how like you see her walking out into the snow and the ice, and her hair starts graying. She starts reverting back to who she is. Because if you remember, in a previous season, they showed her in the mirror at night when she's kind of took off all her magic stuff, and she's like this super old crone. So you're just like, whoa. So literally, she just like turns to dust and blows away in the wind because magic was just holding her all together. So that said, that's kind of all of it. So my then thought was, where are we going from here? Because we all know, there's 3 episodes left. So it's like, what's coming? Because the White Walkers have been neutralized. Maybe not, but to the best of our knowledge, the White Walkers have been neutralized. So my thought is, what's coming next? Most likely, the disappointment that is humanity. That is what's coming next. And by that, I mean infighting amongst the living human beings in Westeros. Do you think I'm right? I feel like you probably do, because that's kind of been one of the big themes in Game of Thrones, is the disappointment of humanity and how terrible we all are to one another, and how you can't see the forest for the trees, and you'd rather fight with each other than take care of the actual problems, which is pretty true to real life, to be honest. You got to look at big picture, people. Stop getting into the little minutia and your grudges and revenge and all that stuff, because that's all a lot of these characters are into. So I just have a feeling, since the big bad is taken care of in this instance, things are going to really start falling apart. People are going to be at each other's throats, literally, and they're going to be killing each other. Because obviously we have the big thing looming of Cersei, who has been in the show saying, I'm just going to let them take care of this, and then I'm going to swoop in and take over. So we know that's coming, but I think there's also going to be some fights, not just between everyone that's left and Cersei. I think there's going to be some more going on. Hope I'm wrong to an extent, but we'll see. Anyway, thank you everyone for checking out this review video. Hopefully you liked it. If you liked anything, if you like any of my videos, hit that subscribe. It means a lot to me in the long run. Hit the notification bell. That'll let you know anytime a video goes up. Give me feedback. Do you like these? Do you think I did a good job? What I'd leave out? What did you really like about the episode? What did you hate about it? Where do you think it's going? That's another big thing. Give me some thumbs ups if you feel so inclined. And thank you. So until next time, well, next time with one of these videos will be next week at the same time for episode 4. Hopefully more crazy stuff going on. Oh, real quick. Speaking of 4, I'm giving this episode 4 stars. I've been doing star ratings for the episodes. The first one I gave a 4-star. The second one I gave a 3-star. This one I'm giving back to a 4. I would have liked it to be at a 4.5 or a 5, and I kind of expected it to be there. But that slowness in the middle of it kind of took it down a bit for me. Plus, there wasn't a ton. There was story development, but there wasn't like a ton of story development. You know what I mean? Yeah, it doesn't make sense. But anyway, thanks everyone for checking this out. Until next time, keep it brutal.